Welcome to Black Rocket Recommends, our new series that aims to inform parents and educators about video game titles, what they contain, and whether or not they're appropriate for children to play. Over the last 20 years, video games have become one of the most popular sources of media entertainment in the world. Each year has brought new tech and graphical innovations, churning out countless games that flood the commercial market. Nowadays, you can walk into any large commercial business and usually find a dedicated section of the store filled with games, consoles, controllers, headsets, and more. Not to mention the enormous online storefronts that give consumers access to massive catalogs of software that can be downloaded right to your computer or console at home. As the video game industry continues to grow, it's also getting harder to keep up with popular trends and become educated on the details of any one game. Even more so for those of us who aren't able to spend the time and energy researching everything our child might point at. Every game that finds itself onto a store shelf should be marked with an ESRB rating that contains a glimpse into the general age range that the title is appropriate for. E for everyone, T for teen, and M for mature audiences only. However, this does not give that much information about what you might find once you actually play the game. What does the ESRB consider to be cartoon violence versus real violence? Are they being accurate? What about online games that might not have an ESRB rating at all? This is where we come in. Each of these videos is made by one of our Black Rocket team members, educators and game enthusiasts who have taken the time to experience what a game has to offer and can give you an inside look into what a game is, along with the information you need to decide whether or not the game is appropriate for your child at home. This is not meant to be a fully fledged review of the game for experienced gamers. So, without further ado, let's take a look at our first premiere title, Metroid Dread. Metroid is a series of games licensed by Nintendo, following the adventures of Samus Aran, a stoic female bounty hunter clad in a suit of futuristic armor that shields her from the many alien worlds and space stations she travels to. While Samus is not one of Nintendo's main mascots, like Mario or Bowser, she still enjoys constant inclusion in Nintendo's collaboration franchise, Super Smash Bros., as a classic fan-favorite character. Armed with a high-tech arm cannon and her incredible acrobatic skills, Samus's journey usually has her running and blasting her way through caverns, tunnels, and hallways filled with aliens and robots, finding new abilities and upgrades along the way to her final destination. The series has a large focus on isolation and atmosphere, interrupted by brief sections of intense action as Samus escapes exploding labs and lava pits, or encounters large monstrous creatures that stand in her way. The games also have their fair share of exploration and scavenger hunting. In almost every room, there are hidden blocks containing small increases to her suit's energy reserves, or missiles that she can fire for extra damage against her tougher foes. In more recent times, Metroid has begun bringing the story of Samus out of the background, giving her a more fleshed out character and personality than her original sprite could have offered back in the 1980s. This makes modern Metroid games an interesting mix of story and challenge that the player can experience at their own pace. Metroid games are notorious for having huge, expansive maps that require a player to backtrack and navigate around using a mixture of map reading and visual clues. This can become frustrating for younger players, and running out of energy means getting sent back to the last place you saved your game and repeating a challenge that you might have only just conquered. Metroid Dread is the most recent release of the Metroid series on the Nintendo Switch console, available to purchase in-store or by download on the Switch's Virtual Store. Dread is a direct sequel to another Metroid title, Metroid Fusion, which was originally released on the Nintendo Game Boy Advance. It is not necessary to have played this, however, as the opening text crawl explains the basics of the world setup and Samus's relationship with two alien species, the Metroids, after which the series is named, and the X, a body-snatching parasite that Samus encountered in Metroid Fusion. A general warning before we move forward. The rest of this section is going to spoil major story details for the purposes of fully informing our audience. To skip the story section, please fast forward to the timestamp shown in the video. Keep in mind that the story of this game does contain material that some parents may want to be aware of before purchasing the game. To sum up the story of Metroid Dread, in her last journey, in Metroid Fusion, Samus was infected by an X-parasite at the beginning of the game. The Galactic Federation, Metroid's sprawling human empire, was able to save her by splicing her DNA with that of the X's natural predator, the Metroid, which by this point is extinct. This leaves Samus as the only remaining being in the galaxy that could resist and destroy the X-parasites. This leads Samus on a mission to the planet named ZDR, which is believed to have X-parasites inhabiting it. Upon reaching the planet, Samus is attacked by a warrior named Ravenbeak, who turns out to be the main antagonist of the story. His goal is to recreate the Metroid species by extracting and replicating Samus's genetic code, using them to harness control of the galaxy. To do this, Ravenbeak cripples Samus's power suit and leaves her at the depths of the planet to be hunted down by 7 robots called Emmys, which follow and chase Samus as she tries to make her way back towards the surface. This extraction is deadly to Samus, and being caught by one of them means experiencing a lethal takedown for which there is little defense. Over the course of the game, Samus is slowly able to regain her lost abilities, destroying Emmys along the way and ultimately confronting Ravenbeak in his fortress above the planet's surface. Once Samus manages to get the best of Ravenbeak, instinct, prompted by her Metroid DNA, causes her to make a fatal error, attacking at the wrong time and finding herself pinned by Ravenbeak, seemingly dying before her Metroid DNA evolves, taking over her body and altering her power suit to grant her victory. Using her new abilities, Samus is able to defeat an X-possessed Ravenbeak and escape the planet before its destruction. The story of Metroid Dread is a bit darker than most other titles, being a desperate battle for survival as Samus struggles to avoid the Emmy robots and the implications of her own body mutating as she becomes more and more akin to a Metroid. While this is not an aspect of the story that is lingered on, or the topic of intense discussion by its characters, it may be difficult to engage with for children of younger ages. Now that you have an idea of what Dread is, let's get down into the nitty-gritty, what's to like and what's not to like. Let's start with the story and visuals. The story content for Dread is mostly great. A daring escape from an alien planet with aliens and robots chasing at your heels is a story that adults and children of all ages can engage with. However, the content can be a bit intense or grim for younger audiences, being accentuated by its presentation and cutscenes and certain sections of the gameplay. While most player deaths in the game involve Samus's suit being beautifully blasted apart in a flash of light as its energy depletes, followed by a fade to white and a game over screen, being caught by an Emmy robot means being pinned down and stabbed by a spear-like probe attached to the robot's head, typically aimed at Samus's neck or chest. This is bound to happen at least once for even experienced players, and while there is no blood or gore, there is no quick cutaway to a black screen just before the strike. This can be an incredibly intense experience for children who cover their eyes or ears when spooky music plays in movies or TV shows. While most major story scenes are skippable, allowing the player to bypass the scene and take control of Samus at the start of the next playable section, some things, such as the Emmy attacks or Samus's confrontation with a heavily mutated Ravenbeak, cannot be skipped and must be played through in order to progress to the next section of the game. Generally, Dread's visuals are much more tame by comparison. When not being chased by Emmy robots, most enemies and encounters consist of an assortment of animal-themed alien creatures, or slower, lumbering robots that fire an assortment of laser weapons at Samus as she jumps and dashes through each room. Most of the violence portrayed in Dread's combat is not realistic. Simple flashes of green, yellow, and red light, with the occasional green or pink alien ooze, resulting in an explosion of purple energy orbs or small missiles that Samus can pick up to replenish her reserves. This changes a bit with the discovery of the X-parasites, which morph from colorful red, green, and yellow blobs into a black ooze that takes on the shape of other creatures from the game. While these encounters are not explicit, they can be a bit tough to watch for a young child with a weak stomach. With presentation out of the way, let's talk about difficulty. How hard is this game, and how much might it frustrate a younger player? The difficulty of Dread can be a bit hard to judge depending on the number of things a player can keep track of. For those with experience using controllers in fast-paced action games, Dread will still challenge, but feel comfortable to ease into. Newcomers to controllers, such as children who are used to playing on tablets or simply watching gameplay through video, may struggle a bit to grasp the depth that Control of Samus offers. The pace of Dread early on is extremely generous. There are no time limits, with enemies being mostly docile and well spaced out to give a new player time to get used to the controls and learn the basics before being dropped into the more demanding sections of the game. This does ramp up after the first Emmy robot encounter, which requires a player to move quickly and efficiently through a series of rooms with a nimble enemy biting at their heels. These encounters can be stressful and difficult to maneuver through under pressure, but do respawn a player at the last safe door they entered through in order to avoid retreading ground. Most encounters and puzzles in the game can be completed with a comfortable grasp of running, jumping, sliding, and shooting missiles at specific angles. with only a handful more technical sections that require more patience than skillful reflexes and complex button presses. The most difficult fight comes at the end of the game, which matches a player against a 3-phase boss battle that can easily last over 15 minutes. Luckily, the Nintendo Switch offers the ability to pause by hitting the home button at any time, allowing players to take a quick breather if they're feeling overwhelmed without losing their progress. Metroid Dread offers a challenging, tense experience that, while enjoyable by most, may be too much, too fast for younger players. Young teens with a love of challenge and some bravery can enjoy the experience, though if your child is easily frustrated, it may be best to make sure that they take a breather now and again. While Metroid is not overly explicit and shows no blood or gore in its combat, what is shown is just above the bar for what would be considered appropriate for younger audiences. Older children might enjoy the option of watching gameplay under supervision, provided that they are old enough to understand what is being shown on screen is just that, a screen. Thanks for tuning into our first episode of Black Rocket Recommends. If you enjoyed the video, please support our ability to make videos like these by hitting the like and subscribe button, along with the notification bell to see future uploads. We'd love to hear back from you in the comments. Did this video help you better understand your child's interests? And what would you like to see us cover next? If you'd like to learn more about our community and class offerings, click the link to our website in the description below, and have a wonderful day.